The stars were dying. At least, that is what it felt like to High Delegate as he stood on the bridge of his damaged ship and watched another world burn. The Confederacy had once been a peaceful union of 12 alien species. They had lived in harmony for thousands of years. They built beautiful cities. They created art and music. They believed that all intelligent life could live together without violence. They were wrong. The Dominion came from the outer rim of the galaxy. They were creatures with hard shells and sharp claws. They did not want peace. They did not want trade. They wanted only conquest and death. In just 3 cycles, they had destroyed 9 worlds. Billions of innocent beings had died. The fleet was broken. Their armies were scattered. Their hope was gone. Was old. His blue skin had faded to gray. His 4 eyes were tired from watching so much death. He had been a diplomat his whole life. He had never held a weapon. He had never needed to. Now he wished he had learned to fight. But it was too late for that. His communications officer, a young female named, looked up from her console. Her voice was shaking. "High Delegate, the fleet has entered the system. They will reach thee in 6 hours. 6 hours. That was all the time they had left. After that, they would be extinct. Their culture, their history, their entire species would be erased from the universe." Closed his eyes. He had sent messages to every known civilization in the galaxy. He had begged for help. He had offered anything they wanted, but no one had answered. They were too powerful. No one wanted to fight them. There was only one option left. One signal that had never been sent before. One destination that was forbidden. Said slowly, "Prepare a broadcast on all frequencies. Maximum power. Aim it towards Sector 7G. His eyes went wide. "High Delegate, that sector is quarantined. The planet there is classified as a Class 12. No ship has gone there in 10,000 years. Whatever lives there cannot possibly help us." "We have no other choice," replied. "Send the message." The signal traveled across the void of space. It passed dead moons and empty systems. It crossed millions of kilometers in seconds. And finally, it reached a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. The planet was called Earth. In a secure facility deep underground, Admiral sat at his desk reviewing reports. He was 53 years old with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had served in the United Earth Defense Command for 30 years. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before humans discovered they were not alone in the universe. That discovery had come 5 years ago when a crashed alien probe was found in the Pacific Ocean. Since then, Earth had been working in secret to build a fleet. They did not know what was out there, but they knew they needed to be ready. Lieutenant Commander entered his office. She was young, only 32, but she was the best tactical officer had ever worked with. Her face was serious. "Admiral, we received a transmission from deep space. It is not a test. It is not a drill. Someone is calling for help." Stood up immediately. "Show me." They walked to the main communications center. On a large screen, the message played. It was in an alien language, but the translation software had already decoded it. The message showed a blue-skinned alien with 4 eyes. He looked exhausted and afraid. Behind him, the screen showed burning cities and fleeing civilians. "To any civilization that can hear this," the alien said, "we are the Confederacy. We are dying. The Dominion has invaded our space. They have killed billions of our people. We have no army left. We have no fleet left. We have only this message, please. If there is anyone out there who believes in justice, who believes in protecting the innocent, we beg you to help us. We will give you anything. We will do anything, please. Do not let us die alone." The message ended. The room was silent, stared at the screen for a long moment. He saw the burning buildings. He saw the frightened children. He saw the desperate hope in the alien's eyes. "Do we know anything about this Dominion?" he asked. Pulled up data on her tablet. Based on the transmission, they appear to be an aggressive species, large fleet, advanced weapons. They have conquered multiple systems in a short time. And the peaceful species, no military, they appear to be scientists and artists. Nodded slowly. He thought about his own daughter, who was 7 years old. He thought about what he would want someone to do if Earth was burning. Call the Security Council, he said. Emergency session now. 3 hours later stood before the leaders of every nation on Earth. He played the message again. He showed them the data. And then he asked a simple question. Do we answer? The debate was short. Some leaders worried about the risk. They did not know these aliens. They did not know what they would find out there. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Earth would help. Returned to his office and began preparing the fleet. 47 warships, 12,000 crew members. They were not many. They did not have the best technology, but they had something else. They were human. They had evolved on a planet of earthquakes and hurricanes. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had fought wars against each other for thousands of years. They knew pain. They knew loss. They knew how to keep fighting when all hope was gone. Lieutenant Commander stood beside him as the fleet prepared to launch. Are you sure about this, Admiral? She asked. Looked out the window at the stars. Those people called for help, he said quietly. They trusted that someone would answer, someone who cared, someone who would fight for them. He turned to face her. That is who we are. That is who we have always been. The fleet launched into the void. Earth's fury was coming. The human fleet traveled through hyperspace for 3 days. For most of the crew, it was their first time leaving Earth. They did not know what to expect. They did not know what they would find. Admiral spent most of the journey studying everything they knew about the and the. It was not much, but it was enough to know that innocent people were dying and that someone had to stop it. On the bridge of the flagship, the UES Indomitable Lieutenant Commander monitored their approach. She was nervous but did not show it. Good officers never showed their fear. Admiral, we are approaching the system, dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds. Stood and looked at the main screen. All ships, battle stations. We do not know what we will find. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in a flash of light. What they saw was chaos. Debris floated everywhere. The remains of destroyed ships, pieces of stations, and in the distance a beautiful green planet that still seemed untouched. They had arrived in time. Within minutes, sensors detected alien ships approaching. But these were not. These were vessels, small, damaged, barely holding together. They moved toward the human fleet slowly as if they could not believe what they were seeing. A communication request came through, accepted it. On the screen appeared High Delegate. He looked even more tired than in the original message. His blue skin was pale. His 4 eyes were red from lack of sleep. You came, whispered. His voice was filled with disbelief. Someone actually came. I am Admiral of the United Earth Defense Command, replied. We received your message. We are here to help. Stared at him for a long moment. Then he began to cry. Tears rolled down his face. He tried to speak but could not find words. Leaned toward. Sir, the alien seems very emotional. He just learned his people might survive, said quietly. Let him have this moment. An hour later, High Delegate boarded the Indomitable. He had insisted on meeting the humans in person. He wanted to see who had answered his call. When the airlock opened, stepped into the human ship, and immediately he felt like he was dying. The air was so hot, it burned his lungs. The gravity pressed down on him like a heavy weight. He could barely stand. 2 of his guards collapsed behind him, gasping for breath. Human crew members rushed forward to help. One of them, a young woman named, Grab's arm to steady him. Her hand was warm, too warm, like touching fire. Are you okay? Asked. She seemed confused. Is something wrong with your ship? Did you not adjust to our atmosphere? Stared at her. This is your normal atmosphere. Yes, standard Earth conditions. Temperature is about 22 degrees Celsius. Gravity is 1 g, she paused. Is that a problem? Felt his heart's racing. 22 degrees. On his, anything above 15 degrees was considered deadly heat, and the gravity was crushing him. He looked at more carefully. She was smaller than him but clearly strong, muscles visible beneath her uniform. Her eyes were sharp and focused. She moved with the easy grace of a predator. Your planet, said slowly, what is it like? Shrugged. Normal, I guess. Mountains, oceans, forests, some deserts. Gets pretty hot in summer, cold in winter. We have storms sometimes, earthquakes, floods. Every word she said made more afraid. Admiral approached them. He was tall and strong. His uniform showed many medals. He smiled at, and the alien saw his teeth. Flat teeth in front, sharp teeth on the sides. High Delegate, welcome aboard. We have prepared a special room for you with lower temperature and gravity. Please follow me. As they walked through the ship, watched the human crew. They moved quickly and efficiently. They laughed and talked to each other. One of them had a bandage on his arm, and when asked what happened, the man just laughed. Training accident, he said. Broke it last week. Should be fine in a few more days. Broke it bones, and he was still working. Noticed other things. The humans ate meat. They drank a black liquid they called coffee that had chemicals in it that would kill most species. They exercised by lifting heavy objects and running for hours, for fun. When they reached the conference room, finally sat down in a cooler environment, he could breathe again, but his mind was spinning. Admiral, he said carefully, I must ask you something. Your planet. It is classified in our databases as a Class 12, the highest classification, a world so dangerous that no species should ever visit it. Raised an eyebrow. Yes, extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, high radiation from your sun, dangerous predators, extreme weather, deadly diseases. Paused. How are you still alive? Laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, just an honest one. We adapted, he said simply. Humans have been surviving on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. We learned to build shelters, make fire, create medicine, hunt animals, farm land. We fought each other. We fought nature. We fought everything. And you survived. We did more than survive. We conquered our world, and now we are ready to fight for others. Looked at the human admiral. He thought about the gentle, his people who had never known war, his people who were dying because they did not know how to fight. And then he thought about these humans, these creatures from a world of death, these survivors who had clawed their way up from nothing, who ate poison and breathed fire and broke their bones and kept going. He had asked the universe for help. The universe had sent him monsters. Beautiful, terrifying monsters. The do not know what you are, said quietly. Captain, commander of the destroyer Hammer of Dawn, entered the room. He was younger than but had the same hard look in his eyes. Let them find out, said with a cold smile. Shivered, for the first time since the war began, he felt something strange in his chest. Hope, but also fear, because he realized that he had invited something into this war that the galaxy had never seen before. Humans were not like other species. They were not peaceful. They were not gentle. They were predators wearing the masks of civilized beings. And now those predators were on his side. They had no idea what was coming. But they would learn. Commander stood on the bridge of his warship and watched the reports come in. 50 ships. That was all he was sending to destroy these newcomers. It would be more than enough. His people had conquered 100 worlds. They had crushed every species they had ever met. These new aliens, whoever they were, would be no different. Commander, his officer reported, the enemy fleet consists of 47 vessels, primitive design, no energy shields detected, basic weapons systems. Clicked his mandibles together in amusement. Primitives, this would be easy. Destroy them all, he ordered. Leave no survivors. The scout fleet moved toward the human position. They flew in perfect formation. They had done this many times before. Attack, overwhelm, destroy. It was simple. Admiral watched them coming. On the bridge of the Indomitable, his crew worked calmly at their stations, stood beside him, reading data from her console. 50 enemy ships approaching, she reported. Standard attack formation. They are not taking us seriously. Nodded. Good. Let them underestimate us. He opened a channel to all ships. This is Admiral. Hold your positions. Wait for my signal. We fight together or not at all. The human fleet waited. The ships came closer. 10,000 kilometers, 5,000, 2,000. Now, said quietly. The human ships exploded into action. But they did not do what they expected. They did not form lines. They did not fight in order. Instead, they scattered like wild animals. Small destroyers dove between the larger cruisers. Fighters launched from carriers and split into dozens of groups. It was chaos, beautiful, deadly chaos. Lieutenant was one of the first pilots into the fight. She was 28 years old and had been flying since she was 16. Back on Earth, she had been a test pilot for experimental aircraft. She had survived 3 crashes. She was not afraid of anything. Her fighter screamed between 2 destroyers. She pulled hard on the controls, spinning her ship in ways that should have been impossible. The G-forces pressed against her body. Her vision went gray at the edges. Any other species would have passed out. Just laughed and kept flying. She fired her weapons. 2 missiles streaked toward a ship. They hit the engine section and the vessel exploded in a ball of fire. One down, she shouted into her radio. All around her, other human pilots were doing the same thing. They flew too fast. They turned too hard. They did things that the computers said were impossible for biological pilots to survive. But humans were different. They had evolved on a world where they had to chase prey for hours. Their hearts were strong. Their blood carried oxygen efficiently. They could endure what others could not. On the Hammer of Dawn, weapons officer was having the time of her life. She had grown up in the mountains. Her family had been poor. She had learned to hunt at age 10. At 16, she had killed a wild boar with only a knife after it attacked her younger brother. She still had the scar on her arm. Now she was aiming weapons that could destroy cities. Captain Mass Driver is ready, she reported. Looked at the tactical display. 3 cruisers were flying in a line, trying to reform their broken formation. Fire, he ordered. Press the button. The Mass Driver was a simple weapon by human standards. It was just a very long gun that used magnets to shoot a metal rod very fast. But very fast meant 30,000 kilometers per second, 3% of the speed of light. The tungsten rod left the Hammer of Dawn and crossed the distance in less than a second. It hit the first cruiser and punched straight through. It did not stop. It continued through the second cruiser, and the third. All 3 ships exploded at almost the same moment. Blinked. Did I just get 3 with one shot? Stared at the screen. Even he had not expected that. Yes, he said slowly. Yes, you did. The battle continued for 19 minutes. 19 minutes of fire and death and destruction. But when it ended, the result was clear. 43 ships were destroyed. 7 had fled. The human fleet had lost only 2 vessels. Commander received the report on his command ship. He read it 3 times. He could not believe it. 43 ships, he whispered. 43 ships lost to primitives. He watched the recordings from the battle. He saw the human ships moving in impossible ways. He saw their pilots surviving maneuvers that should have killed them. He saw weapons that punched through armor like paper. But worst of all, he heard the communications between human pilots. They were laughing. In the middle of battle, surrounded by death, they were laughing and making jokes. They were enjoying themselves. Felt something cold spread through his body. It was an emotion he had never experienced in his entire life. Fear. He immediately sent a message to the Dominion Empress herself, the most powerful being in the Empire. He told her everything: the impossible ships, the deadly weapons, the terrifying pilots. "We have made a mistake," he wrote. "These beings are not normal aliens. They are something else, something dangerous. I recommend full withdrawal." The Empress read his message. She was ancient and cruel. She had built the Dominion through blood and conquest. She had never retreated from anything. She would not start now. "Send all our ships," she commanded. "Every vessel in the fleet. We will crush these creatures and make an example of them. The galaxy will see what happens to those who oppose the." 2,000 warships began moving toward the system. On the Indomitable, Admiral received intelligence about the incoming armada, showed him the numbers on her tablet. 47 human ships against 2,000 vessels. Looked at the numbers for a long moment. Then he looked at his crew, at the faces on the screens from other ships. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "In all of human history, how many times have we won battles we should have lost?" "Thought about it. Many times, sir. We seem to have a habit of it." Smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who knew he might die but was going to fight anyway. "Then let us add one more to the list." He began planning. They were coming with fire and death. But humans knew something about fire and death. They had been dancing with both since the beginning of time. 2,000 ships. Admiral looked at the holographic display and counted them again. 2,000 warships against his 45 remaining vessels. Any normal commander would retreat. Any sane military would run. But humans were not normal, and in war they were never sane. Called a meeting of all his commanders. They gathered in the conference room of the Indomitable. Captain, commander of the battleship Typhoon, lieutenant commander, weapons officer, pilot. They stood around the holographic map and studied the enemy fleet. "We cannot win a direct fight," said honestly. "The numbers are too great." "Then we do not fight directly," replied. "We fight like humans." He pulled up a map of the system. Asteroid fields, gas clouds, the sun, moons and debris from destroyed ships. The system was messy and chaotic. "This is our battlefield," continued. "They are used to fighting in open space. They like clean formations and clear lines. We are going to give them the opposite. We are going to make them fight in the mud." Over the next day, the human fleet worked without rest. They placed mines in the asteroid fields, thousands of them hidden among the rocks. They hacked into communication networks and planted false signals. They positioned ships behind moons and inside gas clouds. And they waited. The armada arrived like a storm. 2,000 ships filled the sky. The Empress herself was aboard the largest vessel, the Eternal Dominion. She had come to watch the destruction personally. "Find the humans and destroy them," she commanded. "I want no survivors." The fleet moved into the system, and immediately things began to go wrong. The first group of ships flew into the asteroid field. The mines detonated. 50 vessels were destroyed before they could even see the enemy. The second group received orders to attack Position 7, but the orders were fake, planted by human hackers. They flew into an ambush where Captain was waiting with the hammer of dawn. His ship fired again and again, destroying cruisers with each shot. The third group tried to use their communication system, but it was filled with contradicting orders. Some said attack, some said retreat, some said the war was over. Confusion spread through the fleet like a disease. Commander led her battleship, the Typhoon, on a suicide mission into the heart of the formation. She was 63 years old. She had a daughter back on Earth. She knew she would never see her again. But she did not care about living. She cared about winning. The Typhoon was old and slow. It could not outrun the ships that surrounded it. Watched as enemy fire tore into her hull. Her crew died around her. Fires burned through the corridors. But she kept going. "All hands abandon ship," she ordered calmly. "Get to the escape pods, that is an order." The crew obeyed. The Typhoon emptied. Only remained on the bridge, steering the burning ship toward the largest dreadnought she could see. She opened a channel. "This is Commander of the UES Typhoon. I want you all to tell my daughter something." Her ship crashed into the dreadnought. At the moment of impact, she pressed the button that overloaded the reactor. The explosion was visible from across the system. The Typhoon was gone, but so were 6 vessels that had been nearby. "Tell her I went down fighting," finished, even though no one could hear her anymore. The battle continued for hours. The humans lost ship after ship, but for every human vessel destroyed, they took 10 ships with them. Pilot found herself trapped. 30 fighters had surrounded her squadron. They had no ammunition left. Their engines were damaged. It should have been the end. Had another idea. She told her squadron to follow her lead. Then she opened the emergency oxygen tank in her cockpit and pushed it out into space. The other pilots did the same. Fired her engine directly at the floating oxygen. The spark ignited the pure oxygen, creating a massive fireball that consumed the fighters. But now had no air. She held her breath. The vacuum of space pressed against her skin. Her blood began to boil. Her vision went dark. 90 seconds later, a rescue shuttle found her floating unconscious in space. She was barely alive, but she was alive. The medic who pulled her aboard shook his head in amazement. 90 seconds in vacuum, he said. That should be impossible. Opened one eye. I was holding my breath, she whispered. On the hammer of dawn, things were getting desperate. The ship had taken multiple hits. Half the systems were offline. The mass driver was overheating. Refused to leave her post. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. Her arm was burned from an electrical fire, but her hands were steady on the controls. "Captain, the gun is going to fail," her assistant warned. "Then we fire until it does," replied. She kept shooting. The mass driver glowed red, then orange, then white. Finally the barrel melted. The weapon was dead. Sat back in her chair and breathed deeply. Then she pulled out her sidearm and pointed it at the door. "If they try to board us," she said quietly, "they will learn that humans are dangerous even without big guns." They had entered this battle with 2,000 ships. After 12 hours of fighting, they had 800 left. 800 ships lost to 45 human vessels. The Empress was furious. She screamed at her commanders. She executed officers who failed her. She could not understand what was happening. "They are just primitives," she shouted. "How are they doing this?" No one had an answer. Commander, watching from a safe distance, finally understood. He had studied the battle. He had analyzed every engagement, and he had realized something terrible. Humans did not fight to win. They did not calculate odds. They did not measure risk. They did not retreat when the situation became hopeless. They fought until there was nothing left. They fought until their ships were burning and their bodies were broken. They fought because fighting was what they did. They were not soldiers. They were forces of nature. And forces of nature could not be defeated by numbers alone. Admiral looked at his fleet, or what was left of it. Only 12 ships remained. The Indomitable was damaged but still functional. The Hammer of Dawn was crippled. A handful of destroyers and carriers floated nearby, all of them by battle. 12 ships against 800. But those 800 were afraid now, could see it in their formations. They were hanging back. They were hesitating. They had learned to fear humans. And fear was a weapon too. "All ships," broadcast, "prepare for the final push. We are going to finish this." Looked at him with tired eyes. "Sir, we cannot win this, you know that." Smiled. It was a sad smile, but also a proud one. Winning is not the only goal. Sometimes the goal is just to show them that we can bleed. And if we can bleed, so can they. He stood up straight. Earth's fury unleashed. The human fleet charged. The hung in space like a green jewel. Millions of innocent beings watched the sky, praying for salvation. They had heard the sounds of battle. They had seen the flashes of light. They knew that someone was fighting for them. They just did not know if that someone could win. The Empress stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and watched the human fleet approach. 12 ships, broken and burning, coming straight at 800 warships. She should have laughed. She should have felt confident. Instead, she felt cold. "Destroy them," she ordered, but her voice was not as strong as before. The fleet opened fire. Missiles and energy beams filled space. The human ships twisted and dodged, but there were too many shots to avoid. One destroyer exploded, then another. A carrier went up in flames. The fleet was dying. But they kept coming. On the Indomitable, Admiral stood firm. The bridge was filled with smoke. Fires burned in the corridors. Half his crew was dead. He had a broken arm and a deep cut across his face from falling debris. But he was still standing. "All hands," he broadcast to his fleet, to the survivors, to the wounded, to everyone who could hear him. "This is Admiral. I know you are tired. I know you are hurt. I know you want to go home." He paused and looked at the stars through the cracked window. "But those people down there on that planet, they called for help. They trusted us. They believed someone would come, and we came. Not because we had to, not because we could win, because it was right." Lieutenant Commander limped to his side. Her leg was injured, but she refused to sit down. She looked at him with eyes full of pain and pride. "Orders, sir?" she asked. Smiled. "One more time, one more time." Captain's voice crackled over the communication system from the crippled hammer of dawn. "Admiral, the mass driver is gone, but we still have engines. Point us at something big and we will make it count." Pilot, flying a damaged fighter held together with emergency repairs and prayers, fell into formation beside the Indomitable. "I still have one missile left. Just tell me where to put it." Weapons officer, still at her station despite her injuries, loaded the last of their ammunition into the backup guns. "Ready to fire, sir. Just give the word." Looked at them all. These brave humans, these survivors of these people who refused to give up even when everything was lost. "Earth's fury," he said quietly, "unleashed." The human fleet charged directly at the Eternal Dominion. They fired everything they had. Ships exploded around the Indomitable. The hammer of dawn took a direct hit and began to spin out of control. Fighters vanished in balls of fire. But the Indomitable kept going. Aimed his ship at the bridge of the Empress's vessel, the biggest ship in the fleet, the symbol of their power. He said calmly, "Tell my daughter I love her." Nodded, tears in her eyes. "I will, sir." The Indomitable crashed into the Eternal Dominion. The collision was massive. Metal tore through metal. Fire and atmosphere exploded into space. The two ships became one twisted wreck of destruction. And then the human reactor overloaded. The explosion was the thing anyone had ever seen. It consumed the Eternal Dominion. It consumed the ships around it. It lit up the sky above the like a second sun. When the light faded, the Empress was dead. Her flagship was gone. 50 of her remaining ships had been destroyed in the blast. And the rest of the fleet turned and ran. They fled into hyperspace as fast as they could. They did not stop to collect survivors. They did not send messages. They simply ran as far and as fast as possible away from these terrifying creatures called humans. On the High Delegate watched the sky clear. He saw the ships disappear. He saw the debris of battle floating in orbit. And he cried. He cried for the who had died. He cried for the worlds they had lost. But most of all, he cried for the humans who had given everything to save strangers they had never met. The war was over. 1 year later, a memorial stood on the. It was a tall stone pillar, carved with the names of every human who had died in the war. 12,847 names, 12,847 lives, given for a species they had just met. At the base of the memorial, there was an inscription. It was written in the language and translated into 400 other galactic languages so that everyone could read it. They came from a world of fire and flood, a world of predators and plague. They lived in defiance of death itself, and when strangers cried for help across the void, they answered, not for glory, not for conquest, but because the strong must protect the weak. Remember them, remember Earth, remember humanity. They were the fury of their world, and they gave that fury for us. High Delegate visited the memorial every cycle. He brought a flower from Earth, a rose with its thorns still attached. He placed it at the base of the stone and stood in silence. "Thank you," he whispered. "We will never forget." On Earth, life continued. The planet mourned its dead. 12,000 families received letters telling them that their loved ones were never coming home. Tears were shed, prayers were spoken, hearts were broken. In a small house on the coast, a 7-year-old girl named looked up at the stars every night. Her mother had told her that her father was a hero, that he had saved an entire species from extinction, that he had fought against impossible odds and won. Did not fully understand. She was too young to understand death, too young to understand war, but she understood one thing. Her father had helped people who needed help. He had been brave when it was hard to be brave. He had done what was right even though it cost him everything. She looked at his uniform hanging in the closet. It was too big for her now, but she was growing. One day she would wear it. One day she would follow in his footsteps and protect those who could not protect themselves. One day she would carry his legacy to the stars. But for now she just looked up at the sky and whispered, "I miss you, Dad." The stars twinkled back at her, cold and distant and beautiful. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was learning a new truth. There were dangerous species and there were peaceful species. There were conquerors and there were victims. And then there were humans. The children of Earth, the survivors of the species that laughed at death and fought for strangers. They had been asked for help. They had answered with fury. And the galaxy would never forget.